Mark Pope has one job this weekend, and that's to make a statement in a massive win over Louisville.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, ladies and gentlemen, it is finally here, Kentucky versus Louisville, and Mark Pope's first Cards game here at Kentucky. I am so excited to break this down for you guys. It's going to be a big matchup. I know Louisville is 6-4, but I think they're a little bit better than their record says they are. We're going to break it down on today's episode. We're going to tell you what we know about the Cardinals, what they do well, what do they struggle with, where have they gone wrong in some of their losses, and then we're going to give you keys to the game and break it down with a final score prediction of course. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And if you want to get tickets, last-minute tickets to this Louisville game, that is the place that you absolutely need to go. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky taking on the Louisville Cardinals. What do we know about Pat Kelsey's squad? Well, first, let's talk about who their new head coach is. Pat Kelsey. Similar to Kentucky, Louisville cleaned house this offseason, and they got a new head coach, a new staff, and an entirely new roster. And the man that got everything going, as far as roster construction, was Pat Kelsey. He has spent time at Winthrop and Charleston, and he was very good at both stops. He was 186-95 at Winthrop and 75-27 at Charleston. He's coming off of back-to-back NCAA tournament appearances with Charleston, and he is expecting to get Louisville back into the big dance this year, and I would expect to as well with the number of high-profile transfers that they brought in. When you watch Charleston, when you see kind of what they were about in the few years that Pat Kelsey was there, and if you want to go back to even his time at Winthrop, he liked to bring out not necessarily high octane in terms of tempo, but strong three-point shooting offenses. If you want to go look at KenPom, if you want to go look at Evan Mia, you can see during his time at both schools, he has trotted out offenses that rely on the three-point shot. And I don't say rely in a negative way. I mean, like, they go out there and they hit a pretty decent percentage from three, but most of their points come from three, or at least an above-average percentage come from three. Unfortunately, this year, that's not necessarily been the case. They continue to take threes. They're going to continue to take outside shots, but they've struggled to hit them, which we'll dive into more in greater detail later on in the show. But what I want you guys to know here off the top is this is a retooling Louisville program. This is a rebuilding year for Louisville, and obviously they've kind of been down in the dumps for quite some time, and it's made this rivalry kind of dead, at least it feels like. And this does, I will say, despite the rebuilding and the retooling and the adjustments, this finally feels like a rivalry game that we can actually look forward to that feels like it's got a little bit of substance, it's got a little bit of punch, because for all of their flaws, which again we will get into, Louisville has been able to win a couple of really solid games. They have beaten Indiana and West Virginia. West Virginia actually is their lone quad one win. I believe they beat both of them in the battle for Atlantis. They blew out the Hoosiers 89-61, and then they went and beat West Virginia 79-70 in overtime. They have 4 quad one losses right now. They lost at home by almost over 20. They lost by 22 to Tennessee at the beginning of the year. They've lost to Oklahoma in the battle for Atlantis. They were blown out by Ole Miss at home in the SEC ACC Challenge, and then they lost by 11 to Duke at home after having a very strong first half. And I was able to watch the Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Duke games, and we'll of course break down in further detail where things might have gone wrong for them in all of those losses. But Louisville had their moments. Pat Kelsey is a good coach. I believe that he is a good coach, and I believe that he will get this program rolling, and they should be a pretty decent team in the ACC this season. If you want to go look at specifically what this offense and this defense does well, it's very, very cut and dry what they have done well on both sides of the ball. On offense, they finish at the rim better than almost any team in the nation. Similar to Kentucky, they attack the rim and they finish with a very high percentage. Now, they are not overly reliant on 2-point attempts or layups. They are actually more overly reliant on the free throw line, but they score efficiently at the rim. On defense, it's the turnovers. They, if you look at KenPom, 22% turnover rate, which is 34th nationally. They're 40th in total turnovers forced this season. So they play with a little bit of pace on offense. They play with some tempo. They control things at the rim. They want to be a three-point shooting team, and they're just not hitting so far this season. So I think that there are signs, and they create turnovers on defense, and they play pretty good defense overall. There are signs of a good program. It's very clear when you look at numbers that Kelsey wants the team to do specific things. They're just not very good at them yet, and frankly, they're probably not going to be very good with the same cast in the future because a lot of these guys are seniors. So experienced, I think physical is another word that you could use to describe them. Chaotic is also another word that you could use to describe them. They have several pieces on this roster where you just look and go, okay, that guy plays a little out of control. Most notably, their top two scorers, which we will get into here in just a little bit. But it's similar to Kentucky in terms of situation. It's just the Wildcats have come out, I think, guns blazing, and they've been able to beat two of the three big opponents that they faced so far. Louisville on the losing side by pretty large margins at different times. But they've also blown out Indiana, and again, they got that big win over West Virginia. So it's a weird start, but you see the potential. You definitely see the potential for the Cardinals. Okay, I want to kind of break down, where does Louisville struggle? Where are the issues? Where could they possibly have problems matching up with Kentucky? What's the Wildcats' point guard situation look like? What are the keys to the game? We'll continue to break all of that down here in just a little bit. Before we do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Guys, if you want to get tickets to this game, there is literally no other place that you should go than Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It's really, really awesome. I've used them for college football, college basketball. I've gone to MLB events. I actually have purchased tickets to a couple different concerts out of state to go see different artists play. It is amazing. You can get in and out of the app really quickly. They've got all-in prices, so you're not confused about what you're paying. You know what you're going to get up front. They've got seat views, which happen to be even better in person, and Game Time ticket coverage as well. So if you want to go to this Louisville game or any future Kentucky basketball game, you can take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition. Wow, it's already Friday. Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, first of all, really appreciate you guys tuning in today. Please subscribe if you're new, and let me know what you think about the show, obviously, in the comments below. Let me know what you think about this matchup in the comments below as well. This is going to be a really, really big-time game for Kentucky. They need to make a statement. And before we kind of break into the negatives where Louisville struggles, I do want to touch on that because it is on the screen here if you're watching on YouTube. Kentucky needs this one. I mean, full stop. You had a really underwhelming performance against Colgate on Wednesday, coming off of that massive game against Gonzaga. Screw you, Zags fans. I don't care about that. You have to win this one. If you're at home and it's not even a quad one win, you're favored by 11 on KP. Vegas has you favored by 10.5. You have to win this game. You know the stakes. You know what happened earlier this summer with the TBT. You know this rivalry. You know how important it is to both sides. You've heard the interviews. You've heard the press conferences about, I believe it was Terrence Edwards Jr., one of the best players for Louisville, saying that some of these guys came here just to beat Kentucky. You have to go and make a statement here. You have to win this game, preferably by a wide margin, but you have to win it regardless. You cannot lose this game. It's very important. There are flaws to this Louisville team, despite being extremely experienced and clear that they have a plan. They're just not executing it as well as they could, I think, right now. There are flaws, though. Offensively, they are just simply inefficient. Pat Kelsey, like I mentioned, has had some really solid three-point shooting teams in the past, especially recently. But this year's Louisville team, they are taking threes. They are just simply not making enough. They take 31.8 threes per game. That is 7th nationally. 7th. They are chucking stuff up, fogging it up. They only make 8.6 per contest, which is 119th nationally, which gives them a shooting percentage of 27%, which is really bad. That is, I believe, one of the worst marks in the country at 344 out of 364 teams, so it's 20th worst nationally. And defensively, actually, we'll get to that in a second. That'll be the other side of like how I break this down here. But offensively, they're inefficient overall. And I think that, again, if they were able to execute a little bit better from beyond the arc, this would be one of the better offenses in the country because they do a really good job on the boards. They are 35th nationally in offensive rebound percentage. They're not really high in terms of rebounds per game total. I mean, they're pretty high in terms of total rebounds, but not on offense. I said that poorly. They don't grab a ton of offensive rebounds, but they're doing a pretty solid job on the boards both ways, if that makes sense. It kind of evens out. They turn the ball over quite a bit themselves, but, they get to the foul line. They shoot really well from two. The only glaring weakness is their three-point shooting. If you could get your guys like Edwards and Chucky Hepburn, which are two of your most dominant ball handlers, if you could get somebody like Noah Waterman, who's been taking a lot of threes, if you could get him to shoot better, he's shooting 22%, former BYU player underneath Mark Pope, you would be, I think, in a much better position. Probably would have gotten a win over Oklahoma, I think. You would have definitely had a better shot to beat Duke earlier this week. You have things that you can work on, but continuing to take all of these threes and just not hitting them is not going to cut it. Unless you just go ballistic like Colgate did in the first half against Kentucky, which, again, I think Kentucky is going to get up for this one. Unless Louisville just goes ballistic, Kentucky's going to play much better three-point defense, and they're going to have a relatively inefficient time, I think, at best, a horribly inefficient time at worst. I think that could be an issue for them in this game. Also, another thing that I think could possibly be an issue for them is transition. Something that if you go and watch the Ole Miss, Duke, and Oklahoma games, it's more prominent against Ole Miss and Duke. They had a lot of struggles turning the ball over and then immediately giving up a score on the other end. And that's something that I think you're going to have to watch in this one. Kentucky doesn't create a lot of turnovers, but they do grab a lot of defensive rebounds, and they start breaks well. Can you, if you are Kentucky, capitalize on the fact that Louisville does not play phenomenally in transition? Stat here for you. Against Ole Miss, Duke, and Oklahoma, Louisville got outscored 26-5 in fast break points combined. 26-5. They got outscored 10-0, if I'm not mistaken, against Ole Miss. They got outscored 12-3 against Duke and 4-2, I think, against Oklahoma. But again, if you go and watch the games, you see a little bit more pace than maybe fast break points indicate. They do not do a good job of getting back in a variety of ways. It's not just at the rim. It is at the rim and from three. So Kentucky, I don't think that there's one big area here tonight where I'm just like, oh, well, they have to do a really good job in transition shooting threes, or, oh, they have to do a really good job in the half court finishing at the rim. I think it's very broad strokes, kind of what we're painting here within this game, because, again, this Louisville team, I think they have potential. They just are not anywhere close to reaching that right now. So three-point shooting, they're overall offensively inefficient. They turn the ball over. They've had issues in transition. They've had issues in transition both ways. They've also turned the ball over whenever they've tried to push the pace, and they just simply, again, can't hit shots from three. They leave a lot of things short, is what I noticed. A lot of, and then the final big negative is that they're light. They're very light. They don't have a player over 230 pounds in their rotation. The heaviest player that they have is Noah Waterman at center, who plays most of his minutes at center, by the way, and he was like a stretch four for Kentucky or BYU last year. 6'11", 230. Their center that plays the most minutes there at the 5, James Scott, is only 220 pounds. And the biggest blow to them is South Florida transfer Kayshawn Pryor, who is 6'10", 225. He's out for the season. He tore an ACL. He was also not shooting particularly well from the floor or from three. He was just being used on a lot of different shots. He had a decent assist rate. But anyway, point being, Pryor is out. So Waterman and Scott are your two guys there, essentially from here on out. Like, you do not have a lot of great options at center, which will play into a matchup issue I will talk about here as we wrap up the show. But I don't quite see for Louisville a clear-cut path to victory unless they overplay some of their discrepancies. If that's the way to phrase it. Unless they outplay their poor performances on paper. The things that they don't do well, they're going to have to do at least average in this one to have a chance to win. Because on the flip side, you look at what Kentucky's doing right now. They have been on a shooting, like just a really long slump. It will not last forever. It will not last forever. Kentucky will have a couple of games here where they catch fire, and the game is not a contest. Do you see it on Saturday? I'd like to hope so, but I don't know. Do you see it on Saturday, or do you see it against Ohio State? Who knows? But it's going to happen. Kentucky's going to break out at some point. Actually, there will be one final thing that I point out here. On top of that, to ask the question, will Kentucky shoot the ball well? Louisville on defense gives up 33.9% from beyond the arc. That's 239th nationally. So while they don't shoot threes well, they also don't play good three-point defense. It could be a problem. Could very well be a problem. So some flaws that don't play well against UK. They don't play well. They don't play well against speed, and they don't play well against the three ball, and they don't shoot the three ball well. So they're gonna have to do some work in this one to get a win here. At least it looks like it on paper. So what are my keys to the game? What are some of the matchups we need to watch? We'll dive into it in just a moment. Before I do it, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. You can continue the action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if they win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives them everything they need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is over at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really appreciate you guys checking out the show. Again, if you've not subscribed, would really appreciate it if you did so wherever you are tuned in. If you've got a final score prediction for this game, drop it in the comments below. I'll drop mine here in just a little bit. But first, keys to the game and matchups. First of all, I think the biggest matchup for Kentucky defensively is against Terrence Edwards Jr., the 6'6", 200-pound wing, senior, Sun Belt Player of the Year a season ago, transferred in from James Madison University, averaging 12.9 points per game so far this year. Not a good three-point shooter, but he does a little bit of everything for the Cardinals in terms of scoring. He is a dominant ball handler. He has a decent assist rate. He gets to the foul line. He shoots well from there. But outside of that, he's not going to give you a ton of issues. He does not rebound the ball. He does not block or steal literally at all. He is a bucket getter. That's what he does. The way that he gets buckets, again, it's a variety of ways. He can shoot from three. He's just not a good three-point shooter. He will slash into the lane and finish at the rim. He's very physical, hitting his layups. I think that he is the biggest matchup problem in this one. And I know Chucky Hepburn is the one leading scoring, but Edwards is the guy that I'm focused on here. Does Kentucky have wings that can keep up with him? Or if he gets matched up onto a guard, does Kentucky have the physicality to keep him away from the rim? I don't know if they do, especially if Lamont Butler is out. So we'll go ahead and talk about that now. Pope does not expect Lamont Butler to play tomorrow, which is a massive, 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 massive blow. If you had Lamont Butler, I would feel extremely confident heading into this one. But you don't. So you have to play Jaxson Robinson. And that's kind of what I'm worried about, because I don't know if Kentucky's going to play Jaxson Robinson primarily at point. Because if you play him at point, you can do a bunch of different things with your rotation. But I think Kentucky may also try and run Travis Perry at guard as well. And what we saw against Colgate was not inspiring, to say the least. I'd love to see Travis Perry get into this game, hit a couple of threes off the bench, have a couple of nice passes, and be a big contributor against Louisville, considering where he's from and who he is. I'd love to see it. I would also like to see Robinson and Oweh split time at point. I'd also like to see Kentucky go with a bigger lineup against this Louisville team that attacks the rim and doesn't shoot well from three. And I'd like to see Kentucky try and get out and run on their own. That's kind of what I would like to see in this matchup. I don't know if Kentucky's going to do that from a matchup standpoint. That's what I would prefer to do. And speaking of having a bigger lineup, let's go ahead and address this as well. I think that Amari Williams has to be the MVP of this game. Amari Williams and Andrew Carr, you can combine them together and say, hey, they need to be the MVP piece of the game. Carr, I think, has been consistent enough this season to where I can say, okay, I trust him to go out there, and I think he can execute at a pretty consistent level. Williams is not. Some of the shots that he takes around the rim, he just needs some more touch on, man. He needs some more touch, and this is one of those games where it's like, okay, Amari, if you're going to be backing guys down or you're going to be fogging stuff up, you need to be efficient. You need to finish at a higher level than you have these past couple of games. Obviously, he finished with a career-high 15 on 6 of 8 against Colgate. Keep that going. You can't have a game like you did against Gonzaga or some of these other earlier games where you're just chucking stuff up and it's not hitting. You have to be able to impose your will. You're about 20 to 25 pounds heavier than anybody that they have on their roster. Go and get a bucket down low. You have the ability to, I think, in this game. You have to be able to execute. Brandon Garrison, as well, is somebody else you need to keep an eye out on. Defensively, can Williams and Garrison hold things down low without fouling? We'll go ahead and get into our keys to the game here because, again, that's kind of where things start and end for me. Keep Terrence Edwards under control. Go out there and run in transition with your wings, Oweh, Robinson, what have you, and then make sure Amari Williams has a phenomenal game. You have to put him in positions to succeed, and if he is able to get into positions, he has to obviously execute on his own. But we'll go ahead and get into the keys here. Number one, defense without fouling. This Louisville team is over-reliant on the free throw line. They get a lot of their points from the charity stripe, and they're very efficient there. Very efficient there. At times. Or excuse me, they've got a lot of different guys that can hit. You have to be able to keep them off the foul line. The second, obviously, is, like I said, control Terrence Edwards. Obviously, it's a matchup thing, but also it's a key to the game. For Kentucky as a team, I think they need to find ways to get to the rim. And yes, they need to finish. But I also think that you can go inside. I think you will have the chance to go inside out at different points in this game. This Louisville team, again, if you want to run things in transition, look to the rim, look outside. You're going to have a ton of spot-up opportunities. I think in this one, just hit. Just hit. And the final thing here is preventing second-chance buckets. You have to get stops. Once the shot goes up, you have to get a rebound. Louisville, again, I'll pull this up, 35th nationally in offensive rebound percentage. They don't grab a ton of rebounds individually, but they have a high percentage. You have to be able to get rebounds if you're Kentucky and get out in transition and try and hurt this Louisville defense. That's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. It's similar to the Clemson game, except Louisville does not have a paint enforcer. Watch Louisville somehow have a bunch of offensive rebounds in this game and they just out physical. I don't foresee that happening. Nothing that we've seen or what is on paper would indicate that even being a possibility. But you have to be able to go out there and just impose your will, unlike you were, because you weren't able to against Clemson. You got to be able to do it against this team. They don't have the pieces to hit you back. Obviously, they're good. They're not great. You see what they're trying to do, but they're not there yet. They shouldn't be there in this game. They should not be there in this game. So final score prediction for me. And this is not a flippant thing. I've kind of thought about this for a little bit. Does this become a defensive style game where Kentucky doesn't shoot well from three again, and Louisville is able to hit enough shots to be in this one? It goes back and forth. Kentucky has to find a way to muscle one out. I think Kentucky does find a way to muscle one out. I think it's closer than what that 10.5-point line ends up saying. I'm going back on my market down prediction that I had earlier this week. It's already busted, so there's no point in just continuing to say, oh, they're going to win by 35. I think Kentucky's going to win 79-74. I don't think they're going to score a ton in this game. I think that I would anticipate another poor shooting performance until I see a good one. I think they find ways to win. I think they do enough statistically to find ways to win. The not having Lamont Butler thing is huge for me. That has completely changed my opinion on Kentucky moving forward. Until he gets back, you are a completely different team. You need your floor general. You need somebody that can be a really good on-ball defender. If you don't have that in this game, look, they've got different guys. I didn't even mention Rain Smith, who's a really good catch-and-shoot guy. You've also got somebody like Hepburn, who has the ability to knock down outside shots and control the ball well. They've got different pieces. Not having Butler hurts. It hurts. But we'll see. We will see. I think they do get the dub, though. There's no world where I'm picking Louisville to win this game. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.